sometimes it's really hard to write a song and you feel stuck. You know, you're at a roadblock, you can't think of a lyric, you can't think of a melody, something will be going wrong. What an AI gives you at this moment in time, I don't think can replicate that, because all it's doing is taking from a database and creating something that fits a pattern in a way. So AI, sure, you have the product, but you miss out on the connection. You miss out on being able to say, maybe you should sing it like this, or how about try this type of word? You miss that. It's almost like that's when you're doing the trial and error. If you use AI to give you the product, there is no trial and error that you're doing. You're not learning, oh, why was this bad? Why did I not like this? I think part of mixing, it is, you know, scientific, but it's also feel-based. You have engineers that go and will just listen to it. They won't really think of values, and they just feel when a sound is right. You'll have to, at some point, put in the appropriate amount of work for the result that you want to get. If you want the world, you've got to put in a world's worth of work.
Matt Parks, producer, writer, artist, one half of Nomad X. Good to have you here.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here.
We're going to talk about AI.
Love it.
You have a very interesting perspective. The key aspects, which I think would be fascinating to explore. So you're of a younger generation. You've been developing your first album for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
You've had some success with a top 10 track in the club charts, pop club charts, Music Week. You've released a track on behalf of Amazon. You worked on their more recent Black History Month campaign. So you've been up to a lot of interesting things. Give me a little view and a background to yourself and what you're generally up to.
Yes, so like you said, I have my hand in a lot of different pots in the music industry. I've been doing music my whole life. It's always something I've been interested in and ready to make my career. And the last couple of years have been a lot of learning, a lot of trial and error, a lot of finding out I didn't know the things I thought I knew, maybe a bit of ego at a young age. But now it's just been really focusing on Nomad X and how do we get our product to the world in a way that will be appreciated and I say loved by you know, the fans, the audience, and really making sure that what we're making isn't, I'll say, shallow, isn't just run of the mill, isn't something you'd find from a lot of other artists, and also making sure that we have a message and a purpose in what we're doing, and not just trying to make music for the clout or something like that.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because obviously we both know a lot about the music industry, and it's been a very interesting journey. One of the big issues that people have when they want to go into the music industry is, especially as an artist, is they have a view of what the music industry is. Everyone's a customer. So no one has any shortage of listening to music, but making music is fundamentally different. I've seen a huge change in how people think about music pre-social media to post-social media. Now, given we're in the throes of what is effectively an AI revolution, can you give me some examples of what were the upsides, but also the downsides of entering an industry so heavily influenced at a state of flux, a point of change, derived around the influence of social media?
It's definitely been interesting seeing the progression, because I grew up almost as social media was developing and becoming more integrated into everyone's lives, and watched in the same way how it's affected the music industry, and from all aspects, from creation of it to the marketing of it to meeting people, all of that. Social media has been able to change the dynamic in the music industry, which I think is a really nice change to see. I think for a long time the music industry was seen as something that was gatekept, or it was very hard to attain, and social media was able to provide an alternative path for aspiring musicians, and not just musicians, but people who wanted to be involved in the industry, whether it's in an A&R capacity or management capacity. It opened a lot of doors for people to start their journey without needing to know the right person or already be in the right place. Which is a pro and a con. I think it allowed for a greater diversity in songs and has allowed certain genres to flourish when maybe they wouldn't have. I think about 2016 to 2021 was a huge time for, what's the best way to say it? I don't want to say clout rap, but almost a punk form of hip hop that thrived off of not doing things the professional way. To use like a technical term, just pushing your 808s really loud and saturating them, making them clip. Typically, you wouldn't want to do that in a professional setting, making a professional track, but it was the vibe of the genre, and it was the broken sort of aesthetic that people really latched onto for a while. Nowadays, that sort of genre has quietened a little bit, but the idea of that was, had it been 20 years previously, I think there would have been a lot tougher time for those artists to actually get their music out there and promote their music to the fans that would have wanted to hear them. It would have been hard to convince a label A&R to be like, I want this track out. I know I've broken all the rules. I know it's not what you usually sign, but people like it. There would have been no proof of people liking it had they not been able to use social media and use more approachable forms of communication, like marketing, to get their stuff out there to their fans.
But how about the other side? The other side being your exposure to music probably came from two areas. One, the people around you growing up, parents, so an element of legacy music, and then your experience at the end of an algorithm. Give me some overview of that.
Yeah, I mean, if I think about the ways that music used to be enjoyed, it was more album-based, I want to say. People would go buy an album from their favorite artist, they'd listen to the album, and they'd spend more time with less music. And it's a good thing, because you spend more time on the songs, you spend more time with the artist, you really get to know that person or that persona that they're trying to portray to you. And it definitely led to a deeper connection between artists and their fan base. Whereas now, I guess with streaming being the main source of listening to music, especially with people under 35, I think it's a ridiculous percentage of people use streaming services to consume music versus other means. And it's become a little more tailored in that sense, where you might not go to your favorite artist and listen to their whole album. You might have listened to a couple of their standout hits, and that's what you come back to. And you don't really spend as much time anymore diving into the artist and finding out about them, which is also, like a lot of things with social media and AI and the music industry, there's a lot of pros and cons. You can access so much music that you might not have had access to before. Maybe the local store didn't have some CDs at some times. I've been trying to buy Pink Floyd records. They're hard to get. They're hard to get because they're just not always available at stores. Whereas now I can, I can go on Spotify and listen to their whole album for one price and not have to go find it, not have to spend all that work. And so in a way, it's made the relationship between the listener and the artist a little more distant because they're no longer diving into that. They have this breadth and they listen to that breadth. They don't really sink their teeth. And an issue with that is also, what are you getting suggested? Like what are these streaming platforms pushing to you? Is it a random collection of songs and albums that you would find in a record store or an actual in-person music store where you could look through and, oh, I've never heard of this artist, or I've never, completely different vibe.
So you're talking about discovery.
Yeah, discovery. It seems good, and on the face of it, it seems like streaming would be able to give you a huge range of music to discover.
Is that the reality though? I mean, if you look at websites, we could look at every website in the world, but we tend to look at 5.
Yeah. You always come back to the same things that you historically come back to. Same thing with music. And the more you go back to that stuff on these websites, the more they're going to learn that, oh, this is what they like. This is the kind of genre they want to listen to. So instead of pushing them a song from a genre out of left field, they pick something similar to your tastes already. And while you might think you're hearing and finding out about more artists, you might actually just be hearing the same thing, albeit in a different package over and over again. And I think about my own experiences going onto a song radio. If I go onto a song radio and there's 30 songs in that playlist, I've probably got 10 to 15 already saved on my liked songs or one of my playlists.
Right.
And so obviously I like hearing the songs that I like to hear, but that's not always why I try to go onto a radio. I want to hear things that would almost challenge me as a musician.
But you see, here's the thing. As a musician with a deep interest in that, you're going to look for things because you're looking for inspiration. You're trying to get a wider view of what works. But if effectively the introduction of algorithmic discovery is serving the audiences with what they like, plus or minus a few degrees, does it lead people to believe that they have a good view of what is happening out in the world, when in fact they don't? Because a bit like social media, I mean, without getting political, there are platforms which is well known, they become echo chambers.
Yeah.
People only then end up, the algorithms go, well, that worked for that guy, so let's give him more of that. So how does that actually have an impact? One, as a new artist, but what differentiates yourself from other artists where you can cross all these divides and really introducing the idea of what makes a great song?
Yeah, I mean, what makes a great song is it's kind of hard to quantify. It's almost something that you feel rather than you can conceptualize or write down. I think with with the algorithms and thinking of echo chambers in that vein, I've looked at other people's playlists and their suggested music, and I've noticed it in myself. I'll hear a song that I think has done really well and is super popular, only to talk to other people and find out they haven't even heard the song. They also haven't even heard the artist. And that's someone who I thought was prevalent in everyone's, algorithm, I'd say. But seeing that it's not is a bit of an indication of like, okay, I've been pushed this. This is what I like, and I thought is what a lot of people liked. But similar to what we said before early on, was that's just me maybe being a bit, having a young person's ego and thinking that my world is everyone's world, and learning that it's actually not.
So for the younger audience, because we have a lot of 16 to 24, 24 to 34 kind of age range, is it something a lot of people are aware of? And if they're not aware of it, then how could you help them describe the circumstances of potentially how could they create value from something that they're not aware is out there, and how have you overcome it?
Well, it's hard. I mean, you could tell people that their algorithms are feeding them the same thing and what they want to hear, and they might not believe you. They might think it's similar to what I thought earlier on, a couple years back. They might not think that's true. They think, oh, no way. Like, I've heard so many different songs on my radio. They couldn't possibly just be feeding me the same things. So I think just, talking to them and making sure that we're seeing almost where they are in terms of understanding that. One of the things that helped me, though, was creating playlists with other people. There's a weird thing, like collaborative playlists, where it'll take the taste profile from what I listen to and then the profile of any number of other people, and it'll combine that into a playlist. And so I've scrolled through some of these playlists with people who I thought I had a pretty similar music taste to, and I'm seeing songs that would never show up on my radio or my, like, a Discover playlist or something like that. Never show up on any of those. That was kind of the first indication of, okay, maybe it's not as open and as discovery friendly as I thought it was initially. And so really the best way to prove to other people that this is the case, aside from reading studies that have maybe delved into the details and like the data on it, is to actually collaborate with music. What is your music taste? Let's sit here and listen to an hour worth of music, and you play a song, then I play a song, and you play a song, then I play a song.
And for context, your partner in Nomad X is from a very different background.
Yeah.
And part of what makes the sound that you have really original is you have very different, diverse backgrounds and cultural experiences. So the blend of that together brings a richness which is, again, breaks the cycle, as the Linkin Park album or a single is, breaking the cycle. Given an idea of how that stepping out of the box and that different influence, and describe Alizar, who's been on this show.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously visually, we're very different. He has a very different, I wouldn't say very different, but he's got a different music taste, which, has led to moments where I grew up, most of what I listened to is either from my dad or from my peers. I listened to a lot of electronic music, a lot of EDM, a lot of house, and a lot of rock music. And that was my sphere. That's something I'm very comfortable with. I love the sound. Always makes me happy when I listen to that type of music. And then as I got older, I met more people out of my immediate sphere who had different music tastes. And that was, people showed me a lot of hip hop. And Alizar showed me a lot of hip hop as well that I probably would not have seeked out on my own time. And that difference in how he grew up, what music he listened to, his parents' musical style or musical tastes, that all trickled down to a completely different palette than I grew up with. And having that, especially when making music, having someone with a completely different taste profile to me opened a lot of doors in terms of maybe I wouldn't have tried this type of rhythm or this type of sound because it wasn't comfortable to me, but because as a duo, that's sort of what we strive to do, is it needs to be not wholly one of us. It has to be the combination of both. Exploring those different sounds and the different rhythms, different instrumentation. That was hugely helpful in developing our sound as a duo, because, like I said, it can't be one or the other. It has to be this melting pot of ideas and sounds. And, you know, our goal is to reach a lot of people with this music. And had we both had a very similar music taste and life experience and upbringing, you know, our album would have been very different. It wouldn't have had the diversity and the interest that I think it has now.
So effectively what you're talking about, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but if I were to interpret what you've just said there, is looking at the human aspect, the originality of who you both are as individuals, the culmination of what you've been exposed to in your lives, your life experiences, and creating something which intentionally puts you into a place to think outside the norm. So if we look at the concept of being a customer, and we've talked about this, even extending to fashion, and all sorts of things in life, everything, at all times you're being sold something, and you may reach conclusions where you think something is an original thought, but in fact you've just been sold to as a customer very well. So if we look in the context of AI, and again there's an element of that with playlists on Spotify, but I think the execution of creating something original is intentionally to do something that you wouldn't traditionally normally do. It's intentionally changing your circumstances to create the unexpected. Now, if we move into describing how to create a song, how to produce a song, and how to end up with a result, with a point and purpose, which is to create something unlike anything that is out there. And again, I'm talking a bit here, but add these up and kind of distill it. If AI, moving into the production side, write something based upon what it is pre-trained, and you get more and more and more of what is pre-trained, then the essence of what creates something unique and interesting and truly creative sits outside of what traditionally can be created. The ingredients of that is fundamentally something completely different, which is human. So describe to me the process that you have and where AI can fit in, and what the difference is between what you create, which is truly original, and where you don't think AI has that essence.
Yeah, so for me, a big part of why I pursue this career is I grew up as a musician. That aspect of this industry is very important to me. And so when I do sit down to the studio alone or with Alizar, trying to do it organically. Like it feels different when you sit down with a keyboard or a guitar and you feel the music as you're creating it. When you're feeling the music, that's when almost the message starts to come out. Like that's when your mind starts to flow and think, oh, this is why I'm playing the chords that I'm playing in the way that I'm playing it, because I'm feeling a certain way right now. Maybe I'm feeling sad or excited. That has a run-on effect on what I'm playing and the song that I'm going to write. And so that emotion is super important to just get down in the beginning of the process. Where AI, if we were to use AI to not replace that step of the process, but even supplement it, it's kind of a shortcut. You know, sometimes it's really hard to write a song and you feel stuck. You know, you're at a roadblock, you can't think of a lyric, you can't think of a melody, something will be going wrong. But part of, you know, the fun, and I think the point of it, is working through those kind of situations without relying on a third party to be completely present and helping you, step by step through that process. Whether it's, a person sitting there and saying, that's good, that's bad, that's good, that's bad, or an AI program.
So just
telling you
for
things.
context, you're describing in the industry what we'd call being boy banded.
Yeah.
So when times get tough and you're in that creative process where the value is created,
where you learn.
What exactly, which moves on to education. The same thing is applicable everywhere. So music is a good distillation, representative of many, many sectors. But that boy banded is, all right, you're not capable, so we'll take a shortcut. And usually that would be a seasoned expert which knows what to do and does it for you. So you have the illusion of progress. And yeah, you move on to the next stage, but you've never created that value, so you can't replicate it. So, and it's usually quite an insult to be boy banded.
Yeah.
Is the extreme opposite to credibility and progress. Of course, certain times you create a boy band because it's part of a commercial product and it's perfectly fine and acceptable. But for the path that you're in and most credible artists, then that wouldn't be the case. So if you phrased AI taking over some of those parts as being boy banded, you would understand that that's an unacceptable shortcut and probably removing the value of the songwriting process in the first place.
Yeah, 100%. I think of the things that I've learned struggling through the various steps, whether it is the songwriting process or the next step where you have to go mix the songs. Sure, an AI can do that, and it'll make your job quicker. You'll be able to get a product, say a product. It might not be a good product, but you'll get something out there.
So there's a cost.
Yeah, it's a cost, and I think about a situation where maybe you have to prove yourself. You have written an album and you used AI to write a lot of your lyrics, a lot of your, instrumentation. You got an AI to mix it. You were just there as almost an overseer on what you wanted the AI to do. That AI is just doing it for you. So by the end of it...
Give an example, because you mentioned one to me before.
Yeah, so I think the best one I could think of is Timbaland. He used a software, I can't quite remember the name, but the whole thing was he had a beat that he liked, and for the purpose of what he was demonstrating, he was alone in the studio, didn't have access to a singer, and so he fed this beat into the program, and the program was able to output a handful of vocal top lines. And with those vocal top lines, they sounded good, they sounded coherent. It wasn't obviously AI, and he was able to take the best parts of those, put them into the beat, and help him almost conceptualize what the final song could be like. Great way to save time if you don't have access to a singer or someone who can at least sing the way that you want that song to go. The downside, if you follow through with that mentality and that methodology where you're just using AI to create the singer, you're using AI to create the lyrics, it's kind of twofold. It removes a human connection in the industry, which is, networking is super important in any industry. Music industry is no exception. And so if you take that moment where maybe you have to reach out to someone on Instagram or a friend of a friend because this person can sing, that might take a day or two to schedule that in. They might have other, commitments that they can't record for you at that moment. They might have signed a deal that prevents them from doing that. A lot of things could get in the way of that. And so AI, sure, you have the product, but you miss out on the connection. You miss out on being able to say, maybe you should sing it like this, or how about try this type of word? You miss that. It's almost like that's when you're doing the trial and error. If you use AI to give you the product, there is no trial and error that you're doing. You're not learning, oh, why was this bad? Why did I not like this? You just get something that an AI created that is pretty good because it learned off of a data set of hopefully pretty good music. and also it sort of removes the authenticity of the music. I think music has to have a soul. And so when you use AI to create your parts for you, you're removing that thought process in your head. And like, what's the point of the song? What's the feeling of the song? What an AI gives you at this moment in time, I don't think can replicate that. Because all it's doing is taking from a database and creating something that fits a pattern in a way. And it'll sound good, but it just won't sound.
But also the next stage, what about when you perform live?
Oh, you can't. If you didn't play any of the instruments, you didn't sing the track.
And also, again, people don't tend to think about it, but you fall in love with the character. You fall in love with the story. And if you look at, yours and Alazar's story, it's a fascinating one. Completely different walks of life.
Yeah.
You're demonstrating that a life experience can create something completely new, fresh, meaningful, that there's a passion towards great songs. There's a passion for the expression of the music in multiple different forms. And even as, one of the tracks, Breathe.
I was just thinking of mentioning
talk me through that.
Yeah, so emotion being a huge part of a song and how you connect with an audience. You could take an AI system or software and say, maybe the prompt is, I want a song that's, sad and nostalgic and, regretful in a way. And you might be able to say, I want you to use this type of wording, this type of, rhyme scheme. You could probably give it quite a lot of information that could narrow down the result that you get out of it. But I think of how we wrote that song, and we started with just a guitar. Like, it was just 4 chords.
Well, even before that, tell me the story behind it.
Yeah, so the song is about both of our grandparents. So we both lost one of our grandparents somewhat recently before we wrote the song. And to us, we went into it thinking almost we want to honor these people. For me, I felt like I didn't get the best opportunity to say goodbye. Like, there were a lot of other things going on in my life at that moment in time, and I wasn't able to, looking back, give it the time and not the severity, but like the seriousness of that. It was a big situation. That's not a light thing to happen. And so we wrote the song.
And did you give me Alazar's perspective as well?
Yeah, so it was a similar thing. He lost one of his grandparents, and in a similar vein to me, didn't get the best chance to have closure. And it really was, that song was almost about closure. How can they had both passed away at this point. There was no redoing that moment in life. But here was an opportunity where we could, I don't want to say make amends because it doesn't feel like it's doing enough justice, but we could take steps to honor that memory of them. And that was the forefront of our mind writing that song, was how can we make this authentic, emotional, and really meaningful to us with the, we weren't writing it really for the audience. We were writing it like, this is our message. This is something we feel we need to get out and deal with. And, a huge part of the song, every lyric we wrote, the verses, the hook, it was all about how can this fit our message and what we're trying to say. And I think it turned out, quite a lot how we wanted it.
You see, when you do things authentically, all the audience probably has had circumstances, or within the context of their own life, the essence of that feeling as well. So whilst you didn't write it for the audience specifically, there's an authenticity that to them, to every single individual that can listen to the song, it will mean what it means to them.
Yeah, that exactly. Because it's a human experience. Everyone at some point in their life will lose a loved one, and most people will probably have a situation where they wish they went back and did something better. And in that vein, the song, it's not explicitly about one person or the other person. It's about the emotion behind it, the emotion of feeling like we missed an opportunity, we wish we could go back. But it's not a specific thing. Oh, we're not saying we lost this person, I really wanted to talk to them. It's about the feeling of, oh, we missed this chance. So how do we talk about missing a chance that is, an important moment of our lives?
In many ways, how do you get to say goodbye?
How do you get to say goodbye? And it's not, and it's not even, you might listen to the song and think of something else, maybe it's a friend, or maybe it's, I don't know, some situation. Maybe it was a girl you saw and you lost an opportunity with that person. The song will still convey that same emotion. You can listen to the song and hear, oh, that is, I do wish I took more time. I do wish I appreciated the moment a little more when it was happening. And that's something I don't know if an AI writing lyrics would be able to quite capture that.
But even if it could, if you knew that AI had done it as opposed to a human, you could get identical results. But one's the real deal, one's honest, the other's synthetic, in effect.
Yeah.
And if we know, that's enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny with AI, I think it can make it can make anything, but it really is the human connection behind an artist, behind a song, that I don't think that connection will go anywhere in, the foreseeable future. There's always going to be a moment where people think, I don't want to relate to a chatbot. I don't want to relate to an AI. I want to relate to a human being that's lived my experiences or similar experiences to me, that deals with the same things, that has, a life as complex as mine.
Music is the currency of emotion.
Yeah, you should listen to a song and you should feel something off of it. And if you listen to a track and it doesn't, then I think, I don't want to say the artist missed the mark, because maybe they felt something to it, but at least commercially, they didn't quite hit the same boxes that they could have hit.
And commercially, effectively, commercial success is simply a metric for it resonated with a significant amount of people, which means it's done its job in an authentic, creative manner.
Yeah. At some point, there definitely is a risk of AI developing enough and advancing enough where maybe it is capable of learning from human interactions and like having an expanded, data set. Maybe instead of just having immediate, like it has one piece of, one set of documents it learns from, maybe it's constantly learning and it's reading human interactions and it's trying to gauge that. I don't think we're super close to that being.
But even still, that's only a component part of the wider relationship. And if we look across many, many different industries, this is a common theme. So something I want to get onto, given your age and your peer group, how people are looking at the idea that jobs are going to be taken, that if you can do everything super quickly and the AI can replace it, what can it not replace? And what is the level of awareness and value put onto things that are very human-centric? And does it create a circumstance where a lot of people become average and not very good? But equally, if that's the case, does that mean those who do really understand where the value is can become great because they can push the boundaries outside the realm and the remit of solely relying upon AI?
Yeah. Well, with I think using AI, it can be useful. There are a lot of aspects of the process of creating music and creating an album, creating a product, where it will help. I think if I take a track and a bunch of, the individual parts, and I want to move it from one software to another, I could get an AI program to just take in those tracks, cut all the dead space out, color code them, give them nice, meaningful names, and automatically organize it in the new software that I'm moving to. That is, I think, a pretty justifiable use of AI. It will limit the amount of opportunity that new producers, new songwriters, new engineers, I think it'll limit their opportunity in the industry, because if you work at a studio and you're an engineer and all of a sudden you can just have an AI do all these not meaningless tasks, because they're very important, but menial tasks, yeah. That takes an opportunity away from a younger engineer to then go in and start learning from the guy that's already there. It becomes much harder for that new engineer to then go and actually learn the skills that are needed to become a professional, to thrive.
So you're talking about like the AI education paradox, where what happens when the last people that know how effectively the end-to-end process works, if effectively that's being replaced by AI, then who understands how AI comes to the conclusion in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think you guys talked about this with in the legal context a couple months ago. Yeah, it is. Yeah, if every young person getting into the industry relies on AI, let's take mixing, for example. It's somewhat of a scientific process. There are certain frequencies that will sound good. There are certain frequencies that won't sound good. And you might be able to have an AI that could do that really well. And I think I saw a video recently of there's a company that was promoting their AI mixing tool, and they had a bunch of producers use it, and all the sound bites of these producers are like, oh wow, that was amazing, that sounds fantastic, that's saving me so much time. But then if AI is doing the mixing for every song, because it's time saving, it's convenient, it's efficient, first of all, what happens to all the mix engineers? Where do they go? And second of all, the AI is probably going to mix every rock song similar, every hip hop song similarly, every folk song similarly, because there's a trend in folk songs over the years of this is, for example, the snare might be louder in a hip hop song, the snare will take front and center. So if an AI mixes your hip hop song, that snare will be front and center. But I think part of mixing, it is, scientific, but it's also feel-based. You have engineers that go and will just listen to it. They won't really think of values, and they just feel when a sound is right. That won't happen as much with an AI, because an AI will just say, this works, because it's worked 1,000 times before. But if you have an interesting, unique song, an engineer might be able to hear, okay, I've had 15 years of experience. I've done 1,000, 2,000 songs in this genre, but this specific one, I hear the emotion they're trying to get, and I think this other path might be a better thing to prioritize, maybe a different instrument or it could be anything really. But to do that, you have to have trained ears. You have to have been doing it for a long time. And you have to have almost the emotional connection to the music. Like, that's how you'd make that decision, rather than a scientific one where you look at numbers. I don't know if an AI could do the emotional part. And that's often what makes a song stand out. You might have 10 songs that are similar. One of them was just mixed differently, and that brought out the emotion that the artist was trying trying to give, you know, in a better way than the other 9 songs. Definitely a lot of people could suffer from it. I think it depends how the industry as a whole and songwriters as a, you know, producers as a group decide to adopt AI.
But if you look at punk music, it was something completely different against how it should be done.
Yeah.
If you look at rock and roll, see a similar sort of vein.
Push the status quo.
Yeah. And you look at even with Sting, I think it was his mum said it sounds like broken music.
Look where it is now.
Exactly. And a key factor is, if you think of the greatest singers of the last 50 years, they're not necessarily the best, they're the most distinct. So it's not the formulaic element that is important, it's the uniqueness. But the uniqueness comes also from the character, the personality. And if you think that taking an artist to market, if you get a really boring person with great music, they'll do all right, but you don't fall in love with that character.
Yeah.
So there's so much more. There's the visual element, there's the fashion element, there's the aspirational figures in a way. So let's move to that aspect of the world and what impact social media has had post the internet revolution and social media revolution into the AI revolution. What's your interpretation of where it's been and where it's going?
So I think social media had the benefit of opening up the industry and really giving people an opportunity. Pro and con, it was, you know, gave people the opportunity. The con is, you know, everyone kind of then thought, oh, I can do this. I'm a musician. I have a social media page. I have a social media presence. All my friends follow it. It led to a huge influx of, at risk of sounding a bit rude, not the greatest music.
Well, average.
Yeah,
but
average.
But the same thing happened in graphic design. As soon as everyone could get a computer, they all became graphic designers. Well, the reality is they weren't. They just had the tools graphic designers had, but they didn't understand typography. They didn't understand the history. They didn't have a sense of space.
Yeah.
All of those things.
Yeah.
And, you know, there is a difference between truly understanding an art and having access to the tools for an art.
Yeah, obviously having access is important. You want, you know, with music, a benefit would be competition. You know, if you hear great music and you're an aspiring musician or aspiring songwriter, you might think, I want to make something like that. I want to get to that level. And so you might be able to find some really talented musicians, but the problem is you might have to scroll for an hour to find one who's good, because I scroll and I see just really subpar music and no one's really calling them out. The comments are all amazing, great voice, things like that. But there's no one there who's telling them whether it's good or bad. It's almost surrounded by yes men. And so I think that is, you know, that's been something that didn't really exist before. It would have been hard before social media to really surround yourself by people who thought your music was good, or even find other people, because you didn't have the access, because you didn't maybe have the skills, or you didn't have the drive to get yourself into a place where you could have the access to a professional. But now you can just put it online, film I say quote unquote music video, because most of them nowadays are just someone walking down a road awkwardly dancing.
Shot on an iPhone.
Shot on an iPhone, yeah. And you know, you can shoot really good stuff on an iPhone, but these people aren't really, I don't know if it's they don't see the value in it, or they just think they don't want to put the effort into it. I'm not sure what it is, but or there's just no care that, you know, they want a product to be perfect. And I think now you can get away with not having a perfect product and people will latch onto it, but
if
it's not
there's no
great.
skill and experience and understanding of the entire process, given, you know, shooting music videos, being a professional cinematographer, you could list all the different skills that people have worked their lives for, built up massive experience and know what works, what doesn't work, what they're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
That's not even a contextual understanding of most people. And they go, I know that. I mean, you've been on several Amazon shoots producing content for them, and you begin to see how much effort and work and thought and calculation goes into even the tiniest detail, which beforehand, you know, the assumption is if you had no contextual basis for reaching a conclusion, there was an assumption. And then, as you're aware, it's pretty tough on the day when you start to shoot. We've seen enough people go through the ringer and just realize what an incredibly high stress, high pressure circumstance situation it is, with a view of calculated decisions to get a result. And it's, does it work? What works? What are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, with you know, social media becoming more prevalent, it also led to a mentality of I can just do it myself, which is good. You know, you should want to understand everything that you're doing, but at some point I think there's a negative to it where you think, oh, I can do this, so I should do this, and you almost reject the experience that maybe hiring someone who's been in the industry for 10 years or even 5 years. You know, if you're a small artist, you might not be able to afford someone who's been in the industry for 10 years, so you might have to, you know, go for someone who's younger. But if you go that route, you know, you're respecting their experience. You understand, okay, maybe like just because I can film this music video, maybe I'll get a better outcome if I have someone who's done it before. But almost the rhetoric is you should be able to do it yourself. Why don't you just do it yourself? And I think doing it yourself makes sense to a point.
Well, it's for communication, isn't it?
Do it to understand how it works, to be able to speak to someone who's been in that field, to properly get across your vision for it. If you've never done it before, you can say, I want it X, Y, Z, and you might have just said the most impossible thing for a music video or a director or a designer. You might have said something that they've tried to do and a lot of people they know have tried to do, and it's just impossible, or it's just outrageous.
Or it costs 200,000 budget.
Yeah.
But your budget's £1,000.
Yeah. So it's almost like doing it yourself is important to understand how it works. But at some point, use the experience of people around you, of professionals who've done it. Like that is a mentality that I think has gone a bit too far. I think people took it a little bit too far to mean, oh, I can do it myself. I got to do everything myself. And then the marketing is subpar. The music video is shaky. The production is not that great. It's all stuff you can hear and you can see on someone's social media. And it doesn't reflect well if you're trying to become a professional. It kind of sets you aside as, oh, look at this, looks and feels amateur. Whereas if you did it yourself, maybe you spent a year or 2 years writing the songs yourself and trying to film content for it, that's how you learn. You learn by failing. But you can't look at the content that you're doing and just say, oh, this is great, people will love this, just because, it's a self-done thing. You did it yourself.
And also another point, which is always interesting, who's waiting for you?
Right. If you're just starting off, you don't have a fan base, you can afford to take the time, or you should take the time. Yeah, obviously there's situations in people's lives where Maybe they can't just take the time to put all the effort. They have other things going on in their lives. They pay for rent and food, and they have an actual job to cover their bills.
But the premise of, well, I'm going to drop a track, and I need to. Why?
Yeah, the purpose. Yeah, that's another thing. Everyone is trying to drop short projects or singles. And while I think there is, some credibility to doing that, if you're really committed and you have everything lined up, maybe you want to drop singles once a month or once every 2 weeks for a year. Maybe that's how you want to advertise yourself, and it works occasionally, but you have to be prepared. Before you drop that first single, all the other songs have to be pretty much there.
Well, the single is predominantly there to promote the main product, which is the album.
Yeah, and that I think is maybe the more professional way of doing it.
Because if you don't have the album, even if you do peak a load of interest, well, what else have you got?
Yeah.
So it's almost in many ways, the predication of social media now leading into AI to make things quicker and faster. Most artists fail after delivering the first album because they start to do really well. And then it's like, right, okay, on to the next. Well, I've been busy. I've been out touring and everything. I don't have the second album or the singles that come with it. And then by the time that's done, all the effort is gone.
Yeah.
Because the momentum's no longer there. And then, well, no, we're past that now. So in many ways, seeing the bigger picture, being very strategic about it, actually makes sense. And being properly prepared. It's like going into a gunfight and go, right, I'm going to just shoot everyone super quickly. Then all your bullets are gone. And then the second wave of attacks comes in, and you think, I have no backup and I've got no ammunition left. That was silly.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I mentioned the dropping singles often, I was watching an interview, and I think it was Russ was talking about it. His brand almost is independent. He spent a long time just making music, and I think he's a good example of doing it yourself, but doing it properly yourself. He, produced a lot of his tracks. He really learned it, and he spent, I think it was 10 years before he got proper success. But he was consistent, and he had the plan, and he had the long-term plan especially. He wasn't just thinking, oh, what's going to happen in 6 months? I don't know. He had an idea of why he was doing what he was doing. It was all for a reason. Whereas a lot of people that just drop don't have that North Star or that real end goal. It's almost, the thought process is almost, I'm just going to do this because a lot of other people are doing it, and I hope that it pops off. It's the same way of someone advertising their song and just standing in their kitchen and lip syncing it, and then posting that, and then doing that again the next day, doing something similar but different the next day. Like, what's the point? Why are you doing this? Why is your kitchen lip sync video gonna get fans? Like, what is it gonna bring to your image?
Well, what's the project? What's the end game?
Yeah. And if I kind of think that type of marketing and if you're an independent musician, everyone's doing that right now. I think if you're thinking of doing that, it's probably not.
So more people could do that quicker with and I think this is key, how the mentality of what AI can do and why.
It's almost a AI, I think, can be a shortcut. Obviously, it can help, but it can just be a shortcut. And you don't really learn from a shortcut. Maybe you learn the shortcut works. Hopefully you learn the shortcut doesn't work, and you have to go back and learn why it didn't work.
But shortcuts can only really be used, and I wouldn't use them as shortcuts because there's no such thing as a shortcut, really. There's an efficiency, but an efficiency based upon contextual understanding of what you're trying to achieve. If you've tried to do it 100 times and you found why efficiency has value in different places, then you can apply that based upon knowledge.
Right, but you have to go through the long process first.
Yeah.
You have to struggle, you have to fail and understand why you failed at certain points.
It's like becoming fit. You go,
Mhm.
right, I want to, this is my goal. I want to be like that. Take a shortcut. You can't just become, lose 2 stone and become super fit and healthy.
Yeah.
It's a net result of the effort every single day. But then you can find out how to, from one day to the next, maintain an optimal state or incrementally create a better pathway of health and fitness. But either which way, it's easy to maintain and it can be quick and efficient upon doing the hard work. But you've got to do the hard work for a sustained period of time to understand what you're trying to achieve, at which point it becomes quite easy to maintain a level of fitness. But getting there in the first place, there's just not really any shortcuts.
Yeah, you have to do the work. You have to do the long way. And it's like, yeah, it's very similar with creation of music. Even if I don't think about AI, if I just took a loop and put it in, you know, into my computer and just created a song around that loop, it might sound really good, but maybe I have to perform it later at some point in my career. The shortcut of getting the loop and just putting it in there and maybe it sounds awesome becomes a problem because now I have to go back and I have to learn. And if it's a guitar loop, it might be really intricate. It might actually be 3 guitars. And then my problem is, okay, do I need 3 guitars in a show? It's a lot of guitars for a show. So then you think, okay, how can I pare this down to 1 guitar? And it might completely change the vibe of the song. Just because you decided to, oh, this is easy, I'll just take this, I like this. Again, there's ways you can do it that work. If you just take, if it's a shaker, that's a pretty easy thing to replicate. All you just got to do is like this, More intricate instruments, that's when you'd run into problems. And with AI, it'd be the same thing. If you ask some software to create you a song, even if you want to write the lyrics to it, and you think, I'm not going to use AI for the lyrics, I'm going to write it myself, and you have AI give you the song, how are you going to perform it? Is it a singer-songwriter thing? Are you just doing it to a backing track? Seemed a little less, cool than having a whole live setting and being able to, you know what you did, you know the parts of the song, you know what you want in the show, and you know what's not necessary. If you just have this AI thing, you don't know how many not silent instruments, but how much is underneath the main audible part of the track that's making it into what it is. And maybe you prioritize certain things and you realize, oh, this is actually not what the song sounds like when you try to make it live.
Yeah, because there's a huge transition there. So one point you just made me think of, if you look at how songwriters make money, so intellectual property, the copyright. So as a writer, if you're the writer of the music, so the composer, if you're the writer of the lyrics, that's another component. Historically, and how it operates today and will probably operate tomorrow, is the intellectual property owners are the primary beneficiaries. Now, if you look at it purely from a major label standpoint, if they can do it all, they could take all the money, right?
Yeah.
But equally, then they don't have an asset to sell. So that's why people are boy banded. So actually, the value is owned by other people that are never at the forefront. So actually, from a revenue generation standpoint, for a small handful, it's beneficial. Like many things in life, that's people exploiting their position, so to speak. But if you look at why Ed Sheeran's done so well, Ed performs, he writes, he produces. The really successful people in the music business, and again, it's the difference between the optics from a customer standpoint and the optics from a writer standpoint. The likes of Dre and others like that have done really well. So how would you look at the value of actually being the creator Because if you get AI to do it, well, potentially is that based on other people's IP, so you don't get that, or are you absolving your ability to generate income from it because it's not really yours? I mean, this is a technical fundamental fact that has huge numbers of implications.
Yeah. Well, if you're a songwriter and you use AI to write a song because you don't feel like doing it that day, yeah, I mean, the problem is who is going to get the money from that song? Because is the AI company going to get the money because they provided the tool to generate that song? Or do you go further and who fed their music and their experience into that AI system? Are they going to make the money? Probably not. I doubt they, get compensated if they just, their music got ripped off of a streaming service or, like YouTube or something.
But we're already seeing that this is happening. So effectively, by the creation of the music through other means, it's already wrapped up in a court case.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the cleanest way is, make the music as a songwriter and do the work. Also, I think the more you use an AI tool, like the quicker you're speeding up your demise. If you're feeding into this AI tool over and over again, it's learning, and you're benefiting from, the time that you now have free because you don't have to sit there and write the song. Eventually, you're kind of proving that an AI can do it for you. And if you work for a label, there could be a point where they get to say, out of the last 10 songs you've written, 8 of them were AI. Why don't we just cut our songwriting team in half, cut our producers in half, and just use AI to supplement? Maybe it's for artists they don't really care about that are on their roster who they're just trying to recoup off of, or, trying to keep happy until their contract runs out. Those artists might get stiffed, and the label might say, oh, here you go. We'll give you this song that an AI wrote. It sounds good. It's produced well. It's mixed well. All you got to do is sing and perform over it. That's a bunch of songwriters that have lost their jobs, that have lost a stream of income. The label might be making more, but I think it's also unsustainable.
But also from a publisher standpoint, isn't it? The way it's structured, you've got the record label, which owns the master. You've got the publishing company that manages the catalog, so the songs. There are numerous different components in exploitation, from brand endorsement deals, there's touring, there's all these other elements. So still, in reality, to be the songwriter, to be the producer, to actually be the label, to have tours, even the simple math says the highest earners, the ones that will last the longest, are the ones that are the whole package.
Yeah.
And that are human driven. Because let's even say they're all AI songs. Well, they can't be performed, they can't really go on tour. It's like, it's maybe a boy band situation or a girl band. It becomes a very different proposition. So from my perspective, and I see this across all industry, same with education, is the people that are willing to do the work and are willing to be creative and do things properly can use the best of being a human and probably do 1,000 times better than any AI. But the mass majority will rarely ever be willing to do what it takes to reach that level, therefore will become more and more homogenized and average using AI.
Yeah.
So in fact, it's arguable that AI could be responsible for creating the greatest artists in the world to come, because it accentuates the human capability. Equally, will further build upon the averagification of the industry off the back of social media.
Yeah.
So it'll create extreme greatness and a lot more average.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think with both social media and AI, arguably it's just intensifying that gap. You know, people have always been content to just do okay. You know, a lot like some people are just happy with that. Others will put in 24/7 every waking hour trying to achieve a goal. With AI and social media, those people still exist. You know, there's the driven people trying to make really something special. They'll be able to flourish. You know, that they might use AI in a way that enhances their ability and you know, makes their music process, the music making process quicker. I think if you're someone like that, you might be able to recognize the pitfalls of using AI to supplement the actual creation of the music because you see that long-term goal. You have that vision of being on stage and you can see maybe where oh, this might be tough to perform or this might like lead me into issues. But if you're not like that, you might see AI as a shortcut to get to that without having to put all the work in. But I don't think that'll ever work. Like you'll have to, at some point, put in the appropriate amount of work for the result that you want to get. If you want the world, you've got to put in a world's worth of work to get there. And if you want that world, but you don't have the drive and you don't have the vision and like the tenacity to get there, you might use AI to just give you a song and think, oh, that's really good. People are going to love it. You're not thinking about why people are loving it. You just think, oh, that was a great product. It's like taking a beat off of, you know, online. Oh, that's a great beat. And I'm going to write a song over it, but why does that beat have anything to do with what you're writing? What, you know, if I'm writing a song, the music that I'm making has a relation to what I'm going to say. Like there's moments in a song where I will want something to happen because something is said. If you take an AI track or just a track online, that won't always happen, or you'd have to force it in a way, and it's going to seem forced. And so like the music making process, I think, is organic. And if you take that away from it, you're going to lose that organic feel. People are going to, I've seen it described as, not specifically with AI, but songs being on autopilot. And so when you hear a piece of music and the instrumentation on every verse is identical and the instrumentation on every chorus is identical, the verse flow is identical. Your two verses, your three verses sound the same. You use the same rhyme scheme, the same melodic flow. People notice that. If it's mostly subconscious, but I've gone back and listened to songs that I used to love, and since noticing the whole autopilot thing, I hear it. And I hear, wow, there was no like transition sound. There was no, the beat didn't cut out for a split second here to give emphasis to another section coming in. And I think that's what a lot of AI music is going to sound like, because that whole autopilot thing, like that, you make a song and then you go through it and you think, oh, how can I make this interesting? What's a moment that I want to pick out? I don't know if you can do that on like through AI yet. And that's super important. Like as a listener, if I hear a song and maybe there's a quiet part about 2 minutes into the song where I hear some birds chirping, or I hear like a ding or a sound of a car, something like that, because, you know, the line in the lyric is something about getting into a car, seeing cars pass. Maybe that's the link. It happens once in the song, doesn't happen again. Maybe you don't even notice it the first time. Maybe not even the fifth time you listen to it, but you've heard it. And that's subconsciously been an indicator for you as a listener. Someone put in the time and effort to make this song stand out a little bit.
It can create visual elements.
Yeah. You make it more than what it is.
Yeah, there's a huge amount under the surface. And in many ways, you've got to know the rules to then break them.
Yeah, it's like shortcuts. You have to go the long way to know how you can successfully do a shortcut or an efficiency, I'll say.
And if AI is learning what the rules are to then create things which apply, what makes things great is the things that are intentionally broken, intentionally different, and intentionally understood to create a different impact, but on the foundation of understanding that you can break the rules. And that's the human element.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think of some of the songs that we wrote for our album. There are guitar parts that were accidents. They came about because I messed up what I was supposed to be playing, listened back and thought, oh, you know what? That actually works really well. But you don't get that trial and error if you put in a prompt and get a response. That came with me doing the same part. I played it, 10 times, and I was trying to get it perfect, but what was actually perfect for the song was the imperfect take. And how can an AI go through that process and know that the imperfection that maybe it never sees in its data set would actually work better for this, in this instance, in this specific circumstance, than what it's done and what it's put out a million other times for like hundreds of other producers. But yeah, like that little moment, make the people hear that. I think people,
It's the magic.
yeah, people latch onto that in a song, and the more AI music that comes out, I would imagine the less moments like that appear. And that's it's not great for expanding like the creativity of music, because if AI is just putting out what it's learned and what has been done before, like you said with rock and roll and punk, and the same thing with kind of the clout rap of the late 2010s, that would never have happened. That would never have been a thing because AI had never seen it before. So how does it know how to break the rules in a way that like people will appreciate? Because it's also to do with the social situations of the time. Like, why did punk music come about? Like
Bob Marley being a perfect one.
Yeah, exactly.
If everything was perfectly fine, Bob Marley would have nothing to sing about. But
Yeah,
he became one of the greatest legends of all time as a response to a social situation.
mm-hmm.
And he became the narrative leader, the figurehead of a feeling and a movement and a people,
Yeah.
which was transcended globally. That's a whole different aspect, but it's so deeply ingrained with what has made pop culture, with music internationally for many decades now, something far, far greater than the sound wave, which represented the audible iteration of the song.
Yeah. I mean, the argument you could make is if an AI system is capable of keeping up with social issues, maybe it could do something that reflects the times, but would it do it in the same way that a human might? Because a human is living those things on a day-to-day. They're emotionally experiencing whatever is happening. Sure, an AI program can see, and maybe it can read and logically understand the path or the steps that it took to get to this stage, but will it be able to accurately reflect the emotions that people are feeling? Like, can AI feel enough emotion to be able to get what the population is experiencing and reflect that in the lyrics, in the song? And then the delivery, it's all the delivery. Like, that's really where you feel an emotion. You go see a performer and you can feel them singing the song. If they're doing it well, you feel the emotion. Who's going to sing the AI song? Or is it going to be an artist? Like, do they even know the emotion that they're supposed to sing it with if they didn't write it? Maybe they're just given the track and that's it. And they're like, okay, this is your song now. This is your single.
That makes him like an actor.
Yeah, figure it out. But then it's like an extreme version of boy banding where you can't even ask a question. Well, I'm sure you could ask questions, but you might not be able to meaningfully get the why or the point and purpose of that specific piece of music.
Well, I think on that note, Matt Parks, looking forward to seeing you live.
Yeah, soon.
And the upcoming album. It's been a pleasure.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.